It's been reported that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has told Donald Trump's attorneys that the president is a subject of his investigation, but is not considered a criminal target at this point. What are the implications of this? And what's the difference between being a subject and a target? Let's talk about that with our good friend Richard Painter, professor of law at the University of Minnesota. He was the chief White House ethics lawyer during the administration of George W. Bush and is currently the vice chair of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. He joins us from Minneapolis. Okay, Richard, what is the point of being a person of interest but not the subject of a criminal investigation? A subject and a target, what's the difference?
Well, it suggests that at this point the special counsel has not gathered sufficient evidence to charge the president criminally, but the president's conduct is certainly of interest to the special counsel. We all know that there's some evidence of obstruction of justice by the president with respect to the Russia investigation, the firing of James Comey, among other things. And that's certainly enough to interest the special counsel, and Robert Mueller and his team will ask questions of the president about his motives for the Comey firing, presumably, and other matters, including perhaps whether they sought to fire Robert Mueller himself. But at this point, it does not appear that they have, or at least are not letting on, if they do have, evidence that would justify criminal prosecution of the president. And I think that's basically where many of us believe that the investigation would be, based on what we've seen so far, that it's very troublesome, the president's conduct.
Is this an attempt to definitely get him to appear across the desk from Mr. Mueller?
Well, I think it's an attempt to be candid with the president's lawyers, that he's the subject of an investigation, of this investigation. He's a person of interest, but he's not being targeted with criminal charges. That doesn't mean that the situation couldn't change based on what the president tells the special counsel, and if there are direct conflicts between what the president says and what other people say happened, there are contradictions. That's something the special counsel is going to look into, and it could result in criminal charges against the president, but we're not at that point yet.
By the way, if you are a target, do they have to tell you you're a target?
They usually do not, although what they can't do is lie to you in the course of the questioning. And so if they say you're not a target, whatever that means, and that's quite ambiguous language. But they do need to be honest in their communications with someone they're questioning. And so I would not expect Robert Mueller's team to be secretly saying, well, the president's a target, but we're going to tell him he's not a target for criminal charges. That's not the way that we conduct business, and I think that could result in serious complications if you want to have a prosecution later on. So I would suggest that it's pretty much exactly as Robert Mueller's team is saying it is at this point in time.
Washington Post also reported that Mueller told Trump's lawyers he's preparing a report about the president's actions while in office and potential obstruction of justice. Now, what do you make of that?
Well, the president's actions in office are extremely troubling. His firing of James Comey, the explanation for the firing of James Comey, one explanation being given in official capacity, and then quickly, soon thereafter, a very different explanation given to the Russian ambassador in front of television and in tweets. So there is evidence, substantial evidence, of obstruction of justice by this president. Whether it rises to criminal obstruction of justice is another matter. And that is a very hard case to prosecute, criminal obstruction of justice. And I think Robert Mueller at this time needs to gather more information in order to make that decision. This could be something that he ends up handing off to Congress and saying, well, this is something you ought to be looking at the House and Senate Judiciary Committee with respect to possible impeachment and removal. But at this time, I'm not going to prosecute for criminal obstruction of justice for whatever reason.
You mean you can commit obstruction of justice without it being criminal?
For purpose of impeachment, yes. I mean, President Clinton was impeached for what amounted to perjury. And if the Republicans had controlled the Senate with enough votes, they would have convicted him. But he was never criminally charged with perjury. It didn't rise to the level where it could be criminally charged as perjury, as lying about his relationship with Ms. Lewinsky. That's an example of something where Congress has the right to interpret the impeachment clause as it chooses and to decide whether the obstruction of justice involved is a high crime or a misdemeanor, whatever that means. And I think it's quite a bit more serious than lying about just sex life.
What do you think about all this fuss about Scott Pruitt, the EPA administrator who has seemed to be against environment and now is in trouble for what he seems is dealing with a lobbyist, getting a break? What do you make of that behavior, and could it possibly be criminal?
Well, he's one of the more ethically challenged cabinet members in a very ethically challenged administration. The violation of the gift rules is probably not criminal unless there's a quid pro quo. The lobbyist says, well, you do what I want, I'll give you the cheap apartment. But he's getting a room for $50 a night in Washington, D.C., and I challenge anyone to find a room for $50 a night in Washington, D.C. He only pays for the nights, but he's actually there. That's a hotel-type arrangement, and that usually costs you $200 a night or more, $500 and some more dollars at the Trump Hotel, of course, but only foreign governments maybe can pay that, and high-priced lobbyists. But the bottom line is that this is clearly a gift from the lobbyist. He has violated a number of other ethics rules, or he's squandering government money on extra salary, extra pay for his political cronies over at the Environmental Protection Agency, or some say it's the Environmental Pollution Agency, or whatever they're doing over there. But he's certainly not somebody who has been an example of uprighteous conduct as a public servant. But this administration has so many people behaving this way, it's awfully hard to figure out who's worse.
You think he'll still be at the EPA in a month?
I don't know where he'll be in a month. There was talk of moving him over to the Attorney General's office and having Jeff Sessions leave, but I assume the only objective there would be trying to fire Robert Mueller. And anybody who gets themselves involved in that is asking for jail time. So I would think that that Scott Pruitt would be a lot better off just staying at EPA with that $50 a night arrangement with a lobbyist rather than ending up becoming a guest of the government in the penitentiary. I mean, this firing of Robert Mueller is a very, very bad idea for anybody who wants to get close to it.
Richard, as always, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Larry.